Smoke rolled across the valley floor like a living thing, thick and red with dust kicked up by incoming fire. The sound was apocalyptic, a symphony of death conducted by distant artillery and the relentless hammering of heavy machine guns. Sergeant First Class Nathan Hale pressed himself into the broken earth, feeling the concussive waves of explosions ripple through his chest cavity. 6 hours. They had been pinned down for 6 goddamn hours. Harper's hit. The voice crackled over the radio, barely audible over the chaos. Corporal James Bennett crawled toward the fallen soldier, dragging himself through a minefield of spent casings and shattered rock. Hale's mind raced through their tactical situation, each assessment darker than the last. The valley had seemed perfect for their observation post elevated position, clear sightlines, multiple egress routes. The intelligence package had been solid, or so they thought. Now, they knew better. The enemy had fed them false coordinates, manipulated their satellite imagery, and turned their perfect position into a perfectly executed trap. The ridgeline they thought was clear had erupted with fire the moment the sun reached its zenith. Desheke heavy machine guns, recoilless rifles, and what sounded like at least 2 mortar teams had opened up simultaneously. Radios still jammed, Staff Sergeant Craig Morrison reported, his face streaked with blood from a grazing wound across his temple. Can't raise TOC, can't raise anybody. Their tactical operations center might as well have been on another planet. The enemy's electronic warfare capability had proven far more sophisticated than intelligence had predicted. Every frequency was drowned in white noise and what sounded like mocking laughter. The UAV that was supposed to provide overwatch had gone down in the first 10 minutes, a victim of whatever air defense system the enemy had moved into position overnight. Without aerial reconnaissance, they were blind. Without communications, they were mute. Without the promised artillery support that couldn't be called in, they were defenseless. Hale counted heads, started with 12, down to 8 combat effective. Harper made 9 casualties, 3 KIA, 6 wounded. Specialist Ryan Foster had a sucking chest wound that Corporal Dylan Martinez was trying to seal with the last of their medical supplies. Private First Class Ethan Cole had taken shrapnel to both legs and couldn't walk. The rest were running on fumes, adrenaline, and rapidly depleting ammunition. "Sir, we need to move," Bennett said, sliding into the depression next to Hale. "We stay here. We're dead. That's just math." "Move where?" Hale gestured at the killing field surrounding them. "They've got every approach covered. We step out of this hole, we're cut down in seconds. So we wait for dark? Dark is 4 hours away. Morrison's bleeding out. Foster won't last 4 hours." Hale's voice was flat, drained of emotion. He'd moved past fear into a strange, crystalline clarity that came with accepting the inevitable. Another mortar round impacted 30 meters away, showering them with debris. Hale tasted copper and dust. His ears were ringing so badly he almost missed Morrison's next words. Movement. Southwest ridge. Every rifle swung toward the indicated direction, though Hale knew it was futile. If the enemy was flanking them now, it was over. They didn't have the ammunition for a sustained firefight, and their position had 0 depth for a defensive fallback. But the movement wasn't what he expected. A single figure emerged from the dust and heat shimmer, moving with an economy of motion that seemed almost supernatural in the chaos. Not running, not taking cover, just walking with absolute confidence through a battlefield that had chewed up an entire Ranger squad. "Is that Bennett started?" "Hold fire," Hale commanded, though his finger remained on his trigger. Friend or foe was a meaningless distinction when your life expectancy was measured in minutes. But something about the figure's approach suggested neither category applied. The figure resolved into a woman as she drew closer, though woman felt inadequate for what Hale was seeing. She was clad in adaptive camouflage that seemed to drink in the environment, making her outline blur and shift. A ghillie shroud covered most of her gear, but what was visible spoke of serious hardware. A Barrett M107, a 1 anti-materiel rifle strapped across her back, a sidearm that looked like a modified 1911, and load-bearing equipment that suggested she'd been in the field for days, maybe weeks. Her face was partially obscured by a mesh face covering, but her eyes were visible, pale blue, cold, and conducting their own tactical assessment of the surrounded Rangers with the same clinical precision a surgeon might examine a difficult case. She moved past their pathetic perimeter without acknowledging the rifles tracking her, dropped into a crouch beside their position, and surveyed the ridgelines with those unsettling eyes. The silence stretched. Hale realized he was holding his breath. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was low, textured like gravel, and carried an authority that had nothing to do with rank. "Give me elevation. I'll take the shot." Hale stared at the woman, his mind struggling to process the surreal nature of the situation. A lone operator, appearing out of nowhere, offering to solve a tactical problem that had defeated an entire squad of Rangers. "Who the hell are you?" Morrison demanded, his suspicion overriding his desperation. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pulled a monocular from her vest and began glassing the enemy positions with methodical precision. Her head moved in tiny increments, covering sectors with the kind of discipline that spoke of thousands of hours of training. "Doesn't matter who I am," she finally said. "What matters is, you've got maybe 5 minutes before they finish their flanking maneuver and roll up this position from the east." "Flanking maneuver?" Bennett exchanged glances with Hale. "We haven't seen any movement on the east side." "That's because they're using the reverse slope of the secondary ridge." She pointed without looking away from her optic. "They've been moving up for the last 20 minutes. Professional, slow, disciplined. You wouldn't spot them without thermal imaging or knowing exactly what to look for." Hale felt his stomach drop. If she was right, and something about her absolute certainty suggested she was, they were about to be caught in a textbook hammer and anvil maneuver. "How do you know all this?" Hale asked. For the first time, she looked directly at him. Her eyes held no warmth, no reassurance, just the cold assessment of someone calculating acceptable losses. "Because it's what I would do, and because I've been watching this valley for 3 days." She returned to her assessment. "Your intelligence was compromised from the start. They wanted you here. The question is why." "Fantastic," Morrison muttered. "We walked into a trap and now we've got a ghost giving us tactical analysis." She ignored him, already moving. She unshouldered the Barrett with practiced efficiency, the weapon seeming to float into position despite its considerable weight. From her vest, she produced a rangefinder, a wind meter, and a small notebook that looked like it had been through several wars. "I need one of you on spotter duty," she said. "Someone who can call wind and movement without freezing up under fire." Hale gestured to Bennett. "You're up." Bennett crawled over, his skepticism clear on his face. "Ma'am, with all due respect, that's an anti-materiel rifle. What exactly are you planning to shoot?" "Everything that needs shooting." She was checking her ammunition now, massive, 50 BMG rounds that looked capable of punching through engine blocks. "First target is their forward observer. He's dug in at 11 o'clock, approximately 1,400 meters, behind the outcropping that looks like a broken tooth." Bennett brought up his own optic and scanned. After a moment, his expression changed. "Holy shit. I see him. He's practically invisible. He won't be for long." She was adjusting the rifle's position now, building a stable shooting platform from materials that would make a marksmanship instructor weep, a half-buried rock, someone's discarded ruck, and her own body positioned with geometric precision. "Even if you hit him," Morrison said, "you'll give away our position. They'll drop mortars on us until there's nothing left but a crater." "They already know where you are," she said calmly, checking her dope card against the conditions. "They've been toying with you, pinning you down until their flanking element is in position. Once that happens, you're done. But if I take out their observer, their forward security team, and their machine gun positions in the right sequence." She paused, making a final adjustment to her scope. "Then their coordination falls apart and you've got a 30-second window to relocate to better cover." 30 seconds? Hale felt hysteria bubbling up. To move 9 men, 3 of them wounded, across open ground? 28 seconds now. She settled into her shooting position with the finality of a door closing. "Better start planning your route." Hale looked at his men, looked at the killing field, looked at the mysterious woman who spoke with the confidence of someone who had done this before, many times, and survived to do it again. He made his decision. "Morrison, get Foster and Cole ready to move. Martinez, help Harper, he comes with us. Bennett, you're on this woman. Everyone else, prepare to displace on my command." "Where to?" Morrison asked. "The Wadi, 200 meters east. It's not great, but it's better than here." Hale turned back to the sniper. You get us that window, we'll move. But if this goes sideways, it won't. She was breathing now, in a pattern, slow, controlled, finding that space between heartbeats where the world becomes still. Call the wind. Bennett checked his meter. Left to right, 3 to 4 miles per hour, gusting 5. Temperature, 96 degrees. Humidity, 22%. She made microscopic adjustments. The Barrett was aimed at a point that seemed to bisect empty air and broken rock. Hale couldn't see the target she claimed was there, and he had excellent optics. Elevation is good, Bennett confirmed, though he sounded uncertain. Range is 1,420 meters, she said. Target is partially deflated. I've got a 6-inch window between 2 rocks. Wind will push the round 8 inches at this range, compensating. Her voice had gone flat, mechanical, the voice of a computer running calculations. That's impossible, Morrison whispered. Nobody makes that shot. She exhaled halfway and held it. The Barrett roared. The sound of the rifle was biblical, a deep, thunderous boom that seemed to compress the air itself. Even prepared for it, Hale felt his teeth rattle. The muzzle brake directed the blast outward, kicking up a cloud of dust that momentarily obscured their position. 1,400 meters away, something happened. Through his optic, Hale saw the enemy forward observer simply cease to exist as a functional human being. The .50 caliber round, traveling at over 2,800 feet per second, found its narrow window between the rocks and delivered its kinetic energy with the finality of divine judgment. Target down, Bennett confirmed, his voice carrying a note of awe. The battlefield changed in that instant. The coordinated fire that had been raining down on their position stuttered, became erratic. Somewhere, enemy commanders were shouting into radios, demanding to know what had happened to their observer, why their fire missions were going unanswered. The sniper was already moving. She worked the Barrett's bolt with practiced efficiency, ejecting the spent casing and chambering a fresh round in less than 2 seconds. Her body repositioned slightly, seeking a new target with the certainty of a predator that has scented blood. Second target, she announced. Machine gun position, 2 o'clock, 1,100 meters, partially dug in. I'm taking the gun, not the gunner. Why the gun? Bennett asked, falling into the rhythm of their cooperation. Gunner is replaceable. Takes 30 seconds to get another body on that weapon. But if I destroy the gun, they lose that firing position entirely. She was already settled, already breathing. Wind? Steady now. 2 miles per hour. Good. The Barrett spoke again. This time, Hale saw the hit through his own optic. The Deshek heavy machine gun, a weapon capable of shredding their position, flew apart in a shower of metal fragments. The gunner, miraculously still alive, threw himself backward as his weapon disintegrated. They're trying to triangulate your position, Morrison warned, seeing movement on the enemy side. Let them try. She was already hunting for target number 3. They're looking for a team. Spotter, sniper, security element. They won't expect a singleton. It'll take them 30 seconds to figure out there's just one shooter. And by then, the Barrett roared for the 3rd time. I'll have relocated. Hale didn't see what she hit, but he saw the result, a secondary explosion on the western ridge that suggested she'd found an ammunition cache or a prepared charge. All positions, prepare to move, Hale commanded. We go on my mark. Wait, the sniper said sharply. Not yet. The incoming round was subsonic, which meant they heard the impact before they heard the shot. Rock exploded where the sniper's head had been a fraction of a second earlier. She had moved on some instinct Hale couldn't fathom, rolling sideways with the Barrett clutched to her chest. Counter sniper, she reported calmly, as if discussing the weather. Good. That means they're scared. That means we're dead, Morrison countered. If they've got a sniper working these ranges, they've got a team, she corrected, already setting up in a new position 10 feet from where she'd been. At least 3 shooters, probably Russian-trained given the approach discipline. They're trying to bracket me, force me to reveal my position with movement. Another shot cracked past, close enough that Hale felt the pressure wave. They're not having much luck, Bennett observed. The sniper smiled, then a thin, dangerous expression that didn't reach her eyes. That's because they're hunting a ghost. She settled behind the Barrett once more. And ghosts don't play by the rules. She fired twice in rapid succession, working the bolt between shots with mechanical precision. The first round was aimed at empty air, or so it seemed. The second followed 3 seconds later, angled toward a completely different section of the enemy line. "Bennett, glass the outcrop at 1 o'clock, 1,300 meters, she ordered. Bennett swung his optic over, scanned, and went very still. You hit the rock face next to him. The spall from your first round. Jesus Christ. You used the rock as a fragmentation grenade. Spalling technique? She confirmed. When you can't get a direct shot, make the environment do the work. She was already seeking her next target. The second round was for his spotter, who was moving to a better position. He isn't moving anymore. Hale felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the battlefield conditions. This woman wasn't just a skilled marksman. She was operating on a completely different level, seeing the battlefield in dimensions he couldn't perceive, calculating angles and ricochets and probabilities with a speed that seemed impossible. "Who are you?" he asked again. This time, she answered, sort of. Call sign was Phantom Lynx. But that was a long time ago, and officially, I've been dead for 3 years. The name hit Hale like a physical blow. Phantom Lynx. He'd heard the stories every soldier had, whispered tales of a female sniper operating in the gray zones where official military action couldn't reach. Confirmed kills in the triple digits. Missions so classified that even the existence of her unit was considered compartmentalized information. And then, 3 years ago, silence. The rumors had said her entire team was wiped out during an operation that went catastrophically wrong. Ambushed, outgunned, left for dead by higher command when the political situation made extraction impossible. "You're supposed to be dead," Morrison said, voicing what they were all thinking. "I was," she replied, not looking up from her scope. "Spent 2 weeks in a mass grave before I dug myself out. By then, the unit had been officially dissolved, all records destroyed. Turns out when operations go bad enough, the easiest solution is to pretend they never happened." She fired again, a quick shot that Hale didn't see connect, but the effect was immediate. Enemy fire from the northern approach ceased entirely. "Took out their radio man," she explained. "They're operating on hand signals now, which means their response time just tripled." Hale's mind raced. If she was telling the truth, and the evidence of her skills suggested she was, then they had one of the most dangerous snipers in recent military history, providing overwatch, but the larger implications were troubling. "Why are you here?" he asked. "If you're dead, if your unit is gone, what's your stake in this?" For the first time, her mechanical precision faltered. A muscle twitched in her jaw. When she spoke, her voice carried an edge he hadn't heard before. 3 years ago, my team died in a valley about 30 kilometers from here. 12 women, best operators I ever worked with. We were sold out by our own intelligence community because we discovered something we weren't supposed to know about. She chambered another round with more force than necessary. "I've been hunting the people responsible ever since, and you know what I've learned? The same group that killed my team has been running operations in this region for years, using American forces as bait to test enemy capabilities, feeding good soldiers into meat grinders to generate intelligence on enemy tactics." "That's insane," Bennett said. "Why would—" "Money," she cut him off. "Defense contracts, weapons sales, reconstruction deals. War is profitable if you're betting on both sides. And you Rangers, you're the latest test subjects." They wanted to see how the enemy would respond to an infiltration at this grid coordinate. Now they know. Hale felt sick. "You're saying we were deliberately sent into a trap?" "I'm saying your intelligence package had so many holes it might as well have been Swiss cheese. I'm saying the same patterns I saw 3 years ago are playing out again." She paused her shooting to look directly at him. "And I'm saying that if I let you die here, the people responsible keep operating. But if I save you, if you make it back and start asking the right questions," she returned to her scope, "then maybe some good comes from all this." A mortar round landed close enough to spray them with gravel. The enemy was adjusting fire, getting closer with each salvo. "Your window is closing," she said. "In 60 seconds, they'll have mortars ranged in. You need to move now." "What about you?" Hale asked. "I'll be right behind you." Her tone suggested this was a lie, but not one she expected to be challenged on. "Go. I'll suppress." Hale made his decision. "Morrison, Martinez, get the wounded up. Bennett, Stay with her for 30 seconds, then break contact and catch up. Everyone else, on me. We move in 5 seconds. Make it 3, the sniper said. They're starting their push. She was right. Through the dust and smoke, Hale could see movement, lots of it. The enemy had committed to their assault, confident that they'd pinned the Rangers long enough to finish the job up close. They were about to learn otherwise. 3, 2, 1, move. The Rangers erupted from their position, moving with the desperate energy of men who knew they were dead if they stayed still. Wounded were dragged, weapons held at the ready. Every man scanning for threats as they sprinted across open ground toward the wadi that represented marginal safety. Behind them, the Barrett began a sustained drumbeat of destruction. The sniper fired methodically, each shot planned to maximum effect. She wasn't trying to kill every enemy soldier, that would be impossible. Instead, she was creating chaos, destroying key weapon systems, killing leaders, and generally making the enemy assault force question their decision to leave cover. A recoilless rifle position exploded as she detonated their ammunition supply. A machine gun team scattered when their weapon was torn apart mid-burst. An officer attempting to rally his men for the final push simply vanished in a pink mist as a .50 caliber round found him. Hale reached the wadi and immediately set up security, covering the approach while his men collapsed into the depression. Martinez was applying fresh bandages to Foster, whose breathing had become labored. Harper was unconscious but alive. Cole was gritting his teeth against the pain in his legs but still combat capable. "Bennett, where's our angel?" Hale demanded into his radio. Static, then. "She's holy hell, she's beautiful. Sir, she's conducting a fighting retreat, displacing after every 2 or 3 shots. They can't pin her down. It's like watching a masterclass in..." Bennett's transmission cut off as another mortar barrage began walking toward the wadi. "Bennett, report." "I'm moving. She told me to run and I'm not arguing with that woman." Bennett appeared 30 seconds later, sliding into the wadi with his gear rattling. "She's still back there, still shooting, still." A massive explosion rolled across the valley as something significant detonated on the enemy side. Hale couldn't tell what had been hit, but the enemy fire slackened dramatically. "Their ammunition truck," Bennett reported, having witnessed the shot. She put a round through the engine block from 1,800 meters. The fire spread to the cargo bed and he shook his head in disbelief. That shouldn't be possible. The angles, the distance, the fact that she's shooting while displacing under fire. "Is she coming?" Morrison demanded. Bennett looked back toward the battlefield, his expression troubled. "I don't know. She just kept telling me to go. Said she had unfinished business to attend to." Hale swore. They owed this woman their lives, and she was out there alone against what remained of an enemy force that had to be absolutely murderous by now. "We're not leaving her," he decided. "Sir, with respect, our mission priority has to be, our mission priority is to not abandon a friendly operative who just saved our entire unit." Hale cut Morrison off. "We find a way to cover her extract, or we die trying. That's not up for debate." His Rangers looked at him, then at each other. To a man, they nodded. They'd all heard the stories of units that left people behind. None of them wanted to be that unit, especially not after what they'd just witnessed. "All right," Hale said. "Here's what we're going to do." The enemy had made a critical mistake. They'd assumed the Rangers were beaten, demoralized, capable of nothing but running and dying. They'd assumed wrong. Hale's plan was simple, probably suicidal, but it had the virtue of being unexpected. Instead of continuing to retreat, they were going to advance not toward the main enemy force, but toward a flanking position that would allow them to provide covering fire for the sniper's withdrawal. "This is crazy," Martinez observed, checking his rifle. "We're down to maybe 100 rounds per man, we've got 3 wounded, and we're attacking?" "We're not attacking," Hale corrected. "We're providing support by fire. Big difference. We get to that rocky outcrop, set up a base of fire, and make the enemy think twice about pursuing our ghost." They moved quickly, using the wadi for concealment until they could reach a position that gave them overlapping fields of fire. The terrain was treacherous, loose rock, uncertain footing, the constant possibility of hidden mines or tripwires. But the Rangers were professionals. They'd trained for this their entire careers, moving under fire, maintaining unit cohesion, adapting to fluid battlefield conditions. The fact that they were doing it while exhausted, wounded, and critically low on ammunition was just another variable to be managed. "Position here," Hale ordered, indicating a cluster of boulders that offered good cover and excellent sightlines. Morrison set up the M240. "Bennett, Cole, you're on security. Everyone else, prepare to engage targets of opportunity." "We're really doing this," Cole muttered, settling into position despite his wounded legs. "We're really doing this," Hale confirmed. "That woman bought us time with her life on the line. Now we return the favor." Through his scope, Hale could see the battlefield from a new angle. The enemy force had been badly mauled, their command structure disrupted, key weapon systems destroyed, and their confidence shattered by a single sniper who seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. But they still had numbers, and numbers eventually tell. Hale counted at least 40 hostiles still combat effective, and they were beginning to coordinate again, using hand signals and runners to organize a systematic sweep of the area where the sniper had to be. "I've got her," Bennett reported, 200 meters north of our last position. "She's Jesus, she's just sitting there. Scope on target, she's waiting for something." "Waiting for what?" Morrison demanded. Hale suddenly understood. She's waiting for them to commit, to bunch up, to focus all their attention on finding her in one location. And then, the Barrett's distinctive boom rolled across the valley. "She's going to make them pay for it." The enemy reaction was immediate and chaotic. Soldiers who'd been advancing in a relatively organized pattern suddenly broke and scattered, seeking any available cover. Their discipline had finally cracked under the relentless precision of the sniper's fire. "Now," Hale commanded, "light them up." The M240 machine gun opened up with its distinctive ripping sound, 7.62mm rounds reaching out to hammer the enemy positions. It wasn't accurate, suppressive fire at this range. They were too far for effective targeting, but it didn't need to be. The psychological effect of taking fire from multiple directions was enough to complete the enemy's disorganization. Hale picked his targets carefully, conserving ammunition, focusing on anyone who looked like they were trying to restore order. He saw an enemy soldier stand up to direct his squad and put 2 rounds center mass. Saw another attempting to set up a machine gun and shifted fire to force him into cover. It wasn't a fair fight. It wasn't meant to be. They were buying time, creating chaos, giving the sniper room to maneuver. "She's moving," Bennett called out, "heading east, using the terrain. Smart she's staying in the dead ground, never silhouetting against the ridgeline." The Barrett continued its intermittent fire, each shot precisely placed to keep the enemy confused about her location. Hale counted 7 shots in 3 minutes, each one finding a target that mattered: a radio, a weapon system, a leader. "They're pulling back," Morrison reported, "breaking contact." Sure enough, the enemy force was retreating not in a rout, but in a controlled withdrawal that suggested professional soldiers who knew when they'd been outfought. They'd come expecting to annihilate a trapped Ranger squad. Instead, they'd been handed a tactical defeat by that same squad and a lone sniper. The firing tapered off, then ceased entirely. The battlefield fell into an eerie silence, broken only by the wind and the distant sound of a helicopter, probably enemy, probably evacuating their wounded. "Anyone see her?" Hale asked. "Negative," Bennett responded. "Last I saw, she was heading into that maze of arroyos to the east. Could be anywhere by now." They waited, maintaining security, but Hale knew she wasn't coming. Whatever her personal mission was, it didn't include extraction with a Ranger squad. She'd saved them because it served her purposes, but she was still operating alone, still hunting whoever had betrayed her team 3 years ago. "Sir, we've got comms back," Morrison announced suddenly. The jamming stopped. "I'm raising TOC now." As Morrison coordinated their extraction, as the sound of American helicopters began to filter through the valley, Hale found himself scanning the horizon for any sign of the woman who'd called herself Phantom Lynx. Nothing. She'd vanished like she'd never been there, leaving only scattered brass casings and enemy dead as proof of her existence. The Chinook helicopter settled into the landing zone, with the graceless efficiency of military aviation, rotors beating the air into submission. Hale gathered his Rangers, accounted for every man, and supervised the loading of wounded onto stretchers. Foster was in bad shape, slipping in and out of consciousness. Harper needed immediate surgery. Cole would walk again, but not without months of physical therapy. The others were battered, dehydrated, and running on fumes, but they were alive. All of them, alive, against odds that should have killed them twice over. Sergeant Hale. The voice belonged to Captain Richard Donovan, their company commander, who'd flown in with the extraction birds. What the hell happened out here? We lost all contact 6 hours ago, and the feed from the UAV showed. The UAV was shot down in the first 10 minutes, sir, Hale interrupted. Along with our comms, we were ambushed by a force that had detailed intelligence on our position, our strength, and our mission parameters. The entire operation was compromised from the start. Donovan's expression darkened. That's a serious allegation, Sergeant. Yes, sir, it is. Hale met his commander's eyes steadily. And I'm prepared to make it in an official after-action report, along with testimony from every man in my squad. You're saying someone leaked our operational details? I'm saying our intelligence package was either catastrophically wrong or deliberately falsified. Either way, sir, people need to answer for it. Hale gestured at his wounded men being loaded into the helicopter. We should all be dead. The only reason we're not is... He paused, uncertain how to explain what had happened without sounding insane. Is what, Sergeant? Is that we received assistance from an unidentified sniper. Female, operating alone, extremely skilled. She provided overwatch and allowed us to break contact with the enemy force. Donovan frowned. Female sniper? There are no female sniper units operating in this AO. Are you sure you didn't? Sir, with respect, I know what I saw. My entire squad knows what we saw. She saved our lives, engaged multiple targets at extreme range, and conducted a fighting retreat that would make the instructor cadre at sniper school weep with envy. Did she identify herself? Hale hesitated. This was the moment where he could mention the name Phantom Lynx, could open up a whole investigation into classified programs and operators who were supposed to be dead. Or he could protect her operational security, give her the anonymity she clearly wanted. Negative, sir. She refused to identify, called herself a concerned citizen, and disappeared before we could properly debrief her. It was a lie, but it felt like the right kind of lie. The woman had saved them while operating outside any official chain of command, pursuing her own mission against people who apparently had enough power to bury entire special operations units. The last thing she needed was the army bureaucracy, shining a spotlight on her activities. Donovan looked like he wanted to press the issue, but the urgent business of evacuating wounded took precedence. We'll discuss this in detail once we're back at base. For now, get your men loaded up. Yes, sir. As the Rangers boarded the helicopter, Bennett sidled up next to Hale. You didn't tell him the truth. I told him enough, Hale replied. The rest is above our pay grade. Way above. You think she's right? About us being set up? I think our intelligence was wrong enough to be criminal and right enough to be deliberate, Hale said carefully. And I think we need to be very careful about who we trust with our operational details going forward. The Chinook lifted off, carrying them away from the valley that should have been their grave. Through the open ramp, Hale could see the battlefield spread out below scarred earth, abandoned equipment, and the lonely evidence of a battle that would never be fully understood by anyone who wasn't there. Somewhere down there, a woman was still hunting, still fighting a war that officially didn't exist against enemies who'd proven they were willing to sacrifice American soldiers to protect their secrets. Morrison leaned over, had to shout to be heard over the rotors. Think we'll ever see her again? Hale thought about pale blue eyes, calculating angles of death with cold precision. Thought about a rifle that boomed like thunder and a woman who moved through chaos like she owned it. Thought about 12 women buried in a mass grave and one who'd clawed her way out to seek vengeance. I hope not, he answered honestly. Because if we do, it probably means we're in the shit again, and I've had enough shit for one lifetime. But even as he said it, he knew it was a lie. Part of him, the part that lived for the mission, that thrived on the edge between life and death, part of him hoped their paths would cross again, hoped he'd get another chance to witness that level of deadly perfection. The helicopter climbed higher, leaving the valley behind. Hale closed his eyes and let exhaustion take him, secure in the knowledge that his men were safe. For now, that was enough. 3 days later, Hale sat in a windowless room at Forward Operating Base Falcon, staring at a digital voice recorder and the two men who represented problems of a completely different kind than enemy combatants. The first man wore civilian clothes, but had intelligence community written all over him. Expensive watch, bland features, the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. He'd introduced himself as Dennis Walker from the Defense Intelligence Agency. The second man was Army Criminal Investigation Command, Major Frank Garrison, whose expression suggested he'd rather be literally anywhere else than conducting this interview. "Let's go through it again," Walker said pleasantly. "Your squad was inserted at grid coordinates Delta 479er, based on intelligence, indicating insurgent activity in the region. You were compromised almost immediately. Is that correct?" "That's correct," Hale confirmed for the third time. "And you believe this compromise was the result of deliberately falsified intelligence?" "I believe our intelligence was either incompetent to the point of criminal negligence, or it was deliberately designed to put us in harm's way." Hale kept his voice level. "The enemy knew we were coming. They knew our approach route. They knew our strength. That's not coincidence." Walker made a note, and then this mysterious sniper appeared. "She wasn't mysterious to us, sir. She was extremely real and extremely effective. But you couldn't identify her. She didn't provide identification, and I didn't ask for her resume while she was saving my men's lives." Garrison spoke up for the first time. "Sergeant, you need to understand how this sounds. A female sniper appears out of nowhere, engages multiple targets at ranges most trained marksmen would consider impossible, then vanishes without a trace? You can see why we're skeptical. Sir, I can provide you with 8 witnesses who will corroborate every detail of my report. I can show you enemy equipment that was destroyed by precision rifle fire. I can. What you can't do," Walker interrupted smoothly, "is provide any concrete evidence that this woman exists. No photographs, no identification, no chain of custody on any of the alleged enemy kills." Hale felt his temper rising. "We were a little busy staying alive to document everything for your investigation, sir." "Of course." Walker's smile never wavered. "And we're not questioning your courage or your tactical decisions, Sergeant. We're simply trying to understand what actually happened versus what you perceived happened under extreme stress." That was it, the implication that they'd hallucinated, that combat stress had created a convenient fiction to explain their survival. Hale recognized the tactic for what it was, an attempt to discredit any testimony that might lead to uncomfortable questions about intelligence failures. "Permission to speak freely, sir?" Hale asked Garrison, ignoring Walker entirely. Garrison hesitated, then nodded. "Granted. Someone sent us into an ambush. Someone provided intelligence that was designed to get Rangers killed. And now, someone is trying very hard to make sure that fact gets buried under questions about my squad's mental state and the existence of a sniper who inconveniently doesn't appear in any official records." Hale leaned forward. "Sir, with respect, this feels less like an investigation and more like a cover-up." Walker's pleasant expression finally cracked, revealing something harder underneath. "That's a very serious accusation, Sergeant. So is deliberately compromising a military operation." "Enough," Garrison said sharply. "Sergeant Hale, you're dismissed. Walker, we'll continue this conversation privately." Hale stood, came to attention, and executed a perfect about-face. As he reached the door, Walker spoke again. "Sergeant, one more thing. If this sniper of yours does exist, and if she's operating without authorization in an active combat zone, that makes her a rogue element, a threat. If you have any contact with her, or any information about her identity, you're legally obligated to report it immediately." Hale turned back slowly. "I'll keep that in mind, sir. If I happen to run into any rogue snipers who save American lives, I'll be sure to let you know." He left before Walker could respond, but not before catching the look on Garrison's face, an expression that suggested the Major knew exactly what kind of game was being played, and didn't like it any more than Hale did. Outside, Bennett was waiting. "How'd it go?" "About how you'd expect. They're trying to memory hole the whole thing, make it seem like we imagined her." "Did you tell them about—" "No," Hale cut him off, "and neither will you. As far as the official record goes, we received assistance from an unknown party who didn't stick around for the after-action report. That's it." Bennett nodded slowly. "You're protecting her." "I'm protecting my men from people who are clearly more interested in covering their asses than finding out who tried to kill us." Hale started walking toward the barracks. "She's out there, hunting the people responsible. Let her hunt. We'll handle our end by staying alive and keeping our eyes open. And if she's wrong, If there's no conspiracy and she's not wrong, Hale said with certainty. You saw what happened out there. That was too well coordinated to be chance. Someone is playing games with American soldiers' lives, and I intend to find out who. Behind them, in the windowless room, Walker and Garrison were having their own conversation, one that would have confirmed all of Hale's worst suspicions if he could have heard it. 300 kilometers away, in a safe house that smelled of gun oil and old coffee, the woman who'd been Phantom Lynx was conducting her own investigation. Her real name was Sarah Mitchell. Though she hadn't used it in years, the name belonged to a different person, a different life before the ambush, before the mass grave, before she'd clawed her way out of hell with nothing but rage and the determination to make someone pay. The Barrett lay disassembled on the table, each component meticulously cleaned and inspected. Maintenance was ritual, prayer, meditation all at once. The rifle had kept her alive through situations that should have killed her. The least she could do was keep it in perfect condition. On the wall opposite, a conspiracy theorist's dream photographs, documents, maps, all connected by red string in patterns that would seem insane to anyone who hadn't spent 3 years documenting the web of corruption that had killed her team. At the center of that web, Blackstone Strategic Solutions, a private military contractor with connections to the intelligence community and a reputation for operating in the gray zones where official military action was politically unacceptable. 3 years ago, her team had been tasked with providing overwatch for a supposedly routine operation interdicting a weapons shipment that intelligence indicated was being transferred to insurgent forces. But when they'd arrived at the designated coordinates, they'd found something else entirely. Evidence of American weapons being deliberately funneled to enemy forces as part of some complex scheme to justify increased defense spending and extended military presence. Her team commander, Captain Jennifer Hayes, had immediately reported the findings up the chain of command. That report had been their death warrant. The ambush had been total coordinated fire from 3 sides. No warning, no chance for evasion. 12 women, the best operators the military had ever produced, cut down because they'd seen something they weren't supposed to see. Sarah had survived by accident, fallen into a drainage ditch that the enemy soldiers had used as a mass grave, buried under her own teammates' bodies. She'd laid there for 2 days, barely breathing, while enemy forces conducted a thorough cleanup of the site. When she finally dug herself out, weak and half-mad with dehydration, she'd found that her unit had been officially listed as killed in action during a legitimate combat operation. The evidence they'd collected was gone. The coordinates where it had happened were now officially designated as a standard combat engagement. It was masterful, transform a murder into an honorable battlefield death, bury the inconvenient evidence, move on. Except they'd made one mistake. They hadn't confirmed all the bodies. Sarah had spent the next 3 years becoming something new. Not a soldier, soldiers had rules, chains of command, restrictions on what they could do. She became a weapon, self-directed and self-sustaining, aimed at the people who'd killed her friends. And, slowly, painstakingly, she'd traced the web back to its source. Blackstone Strategic Solutions was the visible face. But behind Blackstone was a network of intelligence operatives, corrupt officers, and defense contractors who'd turned war into a profit generator. The Rangers she'd saved 3 days ago were the latest test subjects in Blackstone's ongoing project use American forces to test enemy capabilities, generate intelligence that could be sold to the highest bidder, and if a few soldiers died in the process, well, that was just the cost of doing business. Her satellite phone buzzed an encrypted message from one of her few remaining contacts in the intelligence community, someone who'd helped her survive these past 3 years in exchange for the dirt she dug up on mutual enemies. The message was brief. "They're looking for you. The Ranger squad you saved raised questions. Walker from DIA is on the case. Watch your back." Sarah deleted the message and considered her options. She'd known saving the Rangers would draw attention. She'd done it anyway, because letting them die would have been letting Blackstone win. But now the clock was ticking faster. Walker was DIA, which meant serious resources and few scruples about how they were employed. If he'd been brought in to clean up the Ranger incident, he'd eventually trace it back to her, or rather, to the ghost she'd become. She needed to accelerate her timeline. The evidence she'd been gathering for 3 years needed to reach someone who could use it. Someone outside the compromised chain of command. Her phone buzzed again, Different number, unfamiliar area code. She let it ring 3 times before answering, the Barrett's frame within easy reach. Wrong number, she said carefully. Is it? The voice was male, measured, carrying authority. I'm looking for someone who was at grid coordinates, Delta 479 3 days ago. Someone who saved the lives of 8 Rangers. Sarah's hand drifted toward the rifle. I don't know what you're talking about. Please, Miss Mitchell. We both know that's not true. The use of her real name was a calculated show of force, proof that whoever this was, they knew who she was and weren't afraid to demonstrate it. Who is this? She demanded. Someone who's been watching Blackstone Strategic Solutions for a long time. Someone who's collected bits and pieces of evidence but never quite had enough to act on. A pause. And someone who's very interested in what you might have accumulated over the past 3 years. If this is Walker trying to... Walker is a problem for both of us, the voice interrupted. He's Blackstone's cleanup crew. Give him another week and he'll have the Ranger incident buried so deep it might as well have never happened. Give him 2 weeks and he'll find you. And when he does, you won't be given the option to surrender. Sarah processed this. What do you want? I want to compare notes. You have evidence of Blackstone's operations. I have access to resources and institutional power. Together, we might be able to do what neither of us can do alone. Bring these bastards down. It was exactly what Sarah had been working toward for 3 years. And exactly the kind of offer that could be an elaborate trap. I need verification, she said. I need to know you're legitimate. Captain Jennifer Hayes, killed in action March 15th, 3 years ago. Except she wasn't killed in action, she was murdered because she reported American weapons being diverted to enemy forces. Her team was designated Task Force Athena, a compartmentalized program so classified that official records say it never existed. The voice paused. Should I continue? Sarah's throat tightened. Hayes had been her mentor, her friend, the best officer she'd ever served under. Hearing her name spoken aloud, after 3 years of operating alone, was like a knife to the chest. Who are you? She asked again, quieter this time. Colonel David Preston, Military Intelligence. And before you ask, yes, I'm putting my career on the line making this call, but some things are more important than careers. Why should I trust you? Because 3 years ago, I was the intelligence liaison who processed Captain Hayes' report. I was the one who told her to send it up the chain. And when she and her entire team were killed 48 hours later, his voice went rough. I've been trying to make that right ever since. Sarah stared at the wall of evidence, at 3 years of work represented in photographs and documents and red string, at the faces of 12 women who deserved justice. I need guarantees, she said. You need a meeting, Preston countered. Face to face. I'll bring everything I have. You bring everything you have. We compare notes, and if we both agree there's enough to act on, we move forward together. And if I say no, then we both keep working alone. Walker eventually finds you, and Blackstone keeps operating. Your choice. It wasn't much of a choice. Sarah had always known her. One-woman war would eventually reach a point where she needed institutional support to finish what she'd started. The question was whether Preston was offering genuine help or a more sophisticated trap. Coordinates, she said, making her decision. Neutral ground. I'll pick the location. You come alone. Agreed. She rattled off a set of grid coordinates in a remote area she'd scouted months ago, good observation points, multiple escape routes, terrain that favored someone who knew it well. 24 hours, Preston said. I'll be there. The line went dead. Sarah sat in silence for a long moment, Barrett frame cool under her hand, weighing the probability that she'd just made a catastrophic mistake. But ultimately, justice for her team was worth the risk. She'd died once already in that mass grave. Anything beyond that was borrowed time anyway. She began preparing for the meeting, gathering her evidence into a format that could be quickly transmitted if necessary. Planning her approach to the coordinates, gaming out scenarios where Preston was legitimate versus scenarios where he was Blackstone's trap. Either way, 24 hours from now, something would change. The war she'd been fighting alone was about to become something bigger. Sarah Mitchell, Phantom Lynx, allowed herself a thin smile. After 3 years of hunting in the shadows, she was finally about to step into the light. One way or another, Blackstone Strategic Solutions was going to burn. The coordinates Sarah had chosen were in the high desert, where ancient stone formations created a natural amphitheater of sightlines and kill zones. She'd arrived 12 hours early, used the time to set up observation points, booby trap approaches with simple noisemakers, and establish 3 separate fallback positions. If Preston was legitimate, the precautions wouldn't matter. If he wasn't, they might buy her the 30 seconds she'd need to disappear. She watched him arrive through her scope, a single vehicle, civilian model SUV, no escort. Preston himself matched the photograph she'd found in her research. Late 50s, gray hair, cut military short, moving with the economy of someone who'd spent decades in uniform. He stopped the vehicle exactly where she'd instructed, stepped out with hands clearly visible, and waited. Sarah gave it 5 minutes, glassing the surrounding terrain for any sign of support elements, drones, or tactical teams. Nothing. Either Preston had come alone as promised, or he had backup skilled enough to evade her observation. She emerged from cover 200 meters from his position, the Barrett carried casually but ready. Preston tracked her approach, but made no aggressive movements. "Colonel Preston," she called out when she was 50 meters away. "Stay where you are. Show me what you brought." Preston slowly reached into the SUV and pulled out a laptop case. "Everything I have. 3 years of investigation, quietly conducted while I tried to stay below Blackstone's radar." He set the case on the hood. "Your turn." Sarah approached warily, still maintaining tactical distance. "First, I want to know why. Why risk your career? Why buck the system for a unit that officially never existed?" Preston's expression hardened. "Because I sent Captain Hayes into hell based on intelligence I assured her was solid. Because I processed her report and told her it would be handled through proper channels. And because 48 hours later, she and 11 other women were dead, and everyone was telling me it was just bad luck, just the fog of war, just one of those things that happens. But you didn't believe that." "I did, at first. I wanted to believe it. But then I started noticing patterns. Other operations with similar characteristics, good intelligence that somehow went bad, units exposed and cut off, American casualties that seemed almost deliberate." He opened the laptop, pulled up files. "It took me 6 months to find the thread. Blackstone Strategic Solutions was connected to 17 separate operations where American forces experienced catastrophic intelligence failures. Always in regions where Blackstone had active contracts. Always resulting in the kind of combat data that defense contractors pay premium prices for." Sarah moved closer, examining the data. It matched her own findings, but with greater institutional detail, budget allocations, contract specifications, personnel transfers that put Blackstone operatives in position to influence intelligence gathering. "Walker," she said, recognizing a name in the files. "He's been cleaning up for them. Walker's a fixer. When operations get too visible, when survivors start asking uncomfortable questions, Walker shows up to ensure things stay quiet." Preston pulled up another file. "He was involved in the investigation of your team's deaths. Made sure the narrative stayed clean, no uncomfortable questions asked. And now he's investigating the Ranger Squad. And looking for you?" Preston met her eyes. "They know someone interfered with their latest test. They've pulled surveillance footage, analyzed ballistic evidence, even sent people to interview locals in the region. They're building a profile, and eventually, that profile will point them toward a female sniper who should be dead." Sarah considered this. "So what's your play? Even with all this evidence, who do we take it to? If Blackstone has people throughout the intelligence community, we bypass the intelligence community entirely," Preston said. "Congressional oversight. There are still people in Washington who take their oaths seriously. Get this evidence to the right committee, with proper documentation and sworn testimony, and it becomes impossible to bury. They'll deny everything. Discredit the evidence. Discredit us." "Probably," Preston admitted. "But we don't need to convince everyone. We just need to create enough doubt that Blackstone's operations get scrutinized. Once that happens, their entire business model falls apart. They thrive in the shadows. We drag them into the light." Sarah pulled out her own documentation, 3 years of compiled evidence, photographs of meetings that shouldn't have happened, intercepted communications, financial transactions that traced money from Blackstone to enemy hands. Preston whistled low. "You've been busy." "I've had motivation." Sarah laid out her most damning evidence, proof that the intelligence package that killed her team had been deliberately falsified by a Blackstone operative embedded in the intelligence fusion cell. This is the smoking gun. This ties Blackstone directly to the murder of a U.S. military special operations unit. Do you have testimony? Someone who'll go on record? I have myself. I'm the witness. I was there. A witness who's been operating illegally for 3 years, who can't be verified through official channels, whose very existence is classified. Preston shook his head. They'll tear you apart on the stand. We need something more. What about the Rangers? They witnessed Blackstone's latest operation. If they testify, they witnessed an ambush. They can't tie it to Blackstone without our evidence to provide context. Preston was thinking out loud now. But if we could get Sergeant Hale and his squad to give depositions, combine that with your evidence and mine, create a pattern that's impossible to dismiss. Walker won't let them testify. He'll find ways to discredit them, intimidate them, make the whole thing go away. Then we need to move faster than Walker can react. Preston closed the laptop. I have contacts on the Senate Armed Services Committee. People who've been suspicious about Blackstone for years but never had enough evidence to act. We give them everything, your documentation, my research, affidavits from the Rangers, and we do it publicly enough that it can't be buried. Sarah thought about the risks. Going public meant giving up the shadows that had kept her alive. It meant facing courts, depositions, the possibility of being arrested for her unauthorized operations. It meant trusting institutions that had already failed her once. But it also meant justice for Captain Hayes and the 11 other women whose deaths had been written off as acceptable losses. When? She asked. Soon. Days, not weeks. The longer we wait, the more time Walker has to clean up loose ends. Preston extended his hand. Do we have a deal? Sarah looked at the hand. Thought about 3 years of solitary war. Thought about the face she'd seen in her scope. Hale, Morrison, Bennett, all the Rangers who would have died if she hadn't been there. She shook his hand. We have a deal. But Preston, if this is a setup, if you're working for them, then you'll put a round through my skull from 2,000 meters out, Preston finished. I know, and honestly, I'd deserve it. They spent the next 3 hours comparing notes, cross-referencing evidence, building a case that was damning in its scope and detail. By the time the sun started setting, they had something that looked remarkably like justice. I'll contact my people on the committee, Preston said. Set up a secure briefing. Can you lie low for 72 hours? I've been lying low for 3 years. 72 more hours won't kill me. Preston paused before getting into his vehicle. Miss Mitchell, thank you for saving those Rangers, for not giving up, for being willing to trust me. Don't thank me yet, Sarah replied. We still have to survive what comes next. She watched him drive away, maintained her position for another 2 hours to ensure he wasn't leading a tracking team back to her location, then finally packed up her gear and disappeared into the desert night. 72 hours until the meeting. 72 hours for everything to either come together or fall completely apart. Sarah Mitchell had gambled everything on Colonel Preston's integrity. Now she'd find out if that gamble would pay off, or if she'd just signed her own death warrant. Either way, the war was about to go public, and Blackstone Strategic Solutions was about to learn what happens when you leave a witness alive in the mass grave. 72 hours later, Sarah sat in a secure conference room deep in the Senate office building, surrounded by people whose combined authority could end careers and destroy organizations. 3 senators, 2 inspector general representatives, and Colonel Preston, who'd orchestrated this meeting through channels Sarah couldn't even imagine. Sergeant Hale and his squad were there too, flown in under classified orders, still processing the fact that their mysterious sniper had a name and a face and a story that explained everything about why they'd nearly died in that valley. Let me make sure I understand, Senator Patricia Callahan said, her expression carved from granite. You're alleging that a private military contractor has been deliberately compromising U.S. military operations to generate combat intelligence that they then sell to defense contractors and foreign interests? Not alleging, Preston said calmly. Proving. The evidence is comprehensive, corroborated, and damning. He walked them through it. 3 years of documentation, financial records, intercepted communications, and Sarah's eyewitness testimony about what had really happened to Task Force Athena. Then he brought in Hale's testimony about the ambush, showing how it fit the same pattern of compromised intelligence and deliberate exposure. The senators listened in growing horror as the full scope of Blackstone's operations became clear. This wasn't just corruption, it was betrayal at a scale that defied comprehension. How many? Senator Robert Chen asked quietly. How many operations? How many dead? 17 confirmed operations over 3 years, Preston answered. Estimated 73 American casualties that can be directly tied to Blackstone's interference. The actual number is probably higher, we've only documented the cases we can prove. Jesus Christ, the third senator muttered. This is going to explode the entire defense contracting industry. Good, Sarah said flatly. It was the first time she'd spoken in the meeting. Let it explode. These people have been murdering American soldiers for profit. They need to burn. Senator Callahan looked at her with something that might have been sympathy. Miss Mitchell, I want you to understand that your own actions over the past 3 years are legally questionable at best. Operating without authorization, conducting surveillance, engaging in combat operations on foreign soil. I'm aware, Sarah interrupted. And I don't care. I've been dead for 3 years anyway. Anything beyond that is bonus time. She leaned forward. But Captain Hayes and the 11 other women who died with her, they deserved better. They deserved a system that would protect them when they did the right thing. Instead, they got a bullet and a cover-up. The room fell silent. Finally, Preston spoke. We need to decide how to move forward. This evidence is explosive enough that once it goes public, we can't control the narrative. Blackstone will lawyer up. The intelligence community will close ranks. And the media will turn it into a circus. Then we need to move fast and move decisively, Senator Callahan decided. Inspector General launches formal investigation today. Justice Department gets a referral for criminal charges, and we hold public hearings within 2 weeks. Give Blackstone no time to cover their tracks or intimidate witnesses. What about Walker? Hale asked. He's going to know something's happening. If he runs, Walker's already in custody, Preston said with grim satisfaction. Arrested this morning on unrelated charges that will keep him locked up long enough for us to build the real case. He won't be warning anyone. Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Walker in custody meant one less obstacle, one less person who could interfere with justice for her team. Miss Mitchell, Senator Chen said carefully, I need to know, are you prepared for what comes next? The publicity, the investigation into your own actions, the possibility of criminal charges? Sarah thought about 12 women who'd never gotten to tell their own story. Thought about how many other soldiers would die if Blackstone was allowed to continue operating. I'm prepared, she said. I'll testify. I'll face whatever consequences come. As long as Blackstone burns, it's worth it. The meeting concluded with handshakes and promises of protection for witnesses. Sarah found herself face to face with Hale as they left the conference room. So, Hale said awkwardly, phantom links. Sarah, she corrected, I'm done with call signs. Sarah. Then, he extended his hand. Thank you. For what you did for my squad. For all of this. She shook his hand. You don't need to thank me. You and your men were just the latest victims. I'm glad I was there to make a difference. What will you do now? After all this? Sarah considered the question. For 3 years, her entire existence had been focused on one goal, bringing down the people who'd murdered her team. She hadn't thought much about what came after. I don't know, she admitted. Maybe retire. Maybe disappear. Maybe finally get some sleep that isn't interrupted by nightmares. She smiled without humor. Or maybe the government decides I'm too dangerous to leave unsupervised and I spend the next decade in a cell. Could go either way. For what it's worth, Hale said, if they try to prosecute you for what you've done, I'll testify that you're a hero. My whole squad will. I'm not a hero, Sergeant. I'm just someone who was too stubborn to stay dead. Preston approached, carrying a briefcase. Miss Mitchell, we need to get you to a safe location. Blackstone has resources we haven't fully neutralized yet. Until the hearings are public, you're still at risk. Sarah nodded, understanding. The war wasn't over yet, just entering its final phase. As they walked through the corridors of power, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a mass grave in a forgotten valley to the halls of the Senate. From a weapon of vengeance to a witness for justice. Captain Hayes would have been proud. Sarah hoped she'd done right by her mentor's memory, by the sacrifice of Task Force Athena. Outside, Washington, D.C. sprawled under an overcast sky. Somewhere in this city, Blackstone executives were about to have a very bad day. Somewhere, defense contractors were about to discover that their profitable arrangements were coming apart. And somewhere, 12 women rested a little easier, knowing that their deaths hadn't been in vain. Sarah Mitchell climbed into the unmarked vehicle that would take her to protective custody. The Barretts still within reach, some habits were too ingrained to break. As they pulled away from the Senate building, she allowed herself something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. Maybe justice was possible after all. Maybe the system could still work when good people refused to stay silent. Maybe, just maybe, she could finally put down the rifle and rest. But not yet. Not until Blackstone burned. Not until every person responsible faced consequences. Sarah Mitchell, Phantom Lynx, had one last mission to complete, and she'd be damned if she failed now. 3 months later. The hearings had been everything promised, and worse. Blackstone's strategic solutions had imploded under the weight of evidence, its executives facing criminal charges, its contracts canceled, its reputation destroyed beyond recovery. Walker had turned state's witness, providing testimony that implicated dozens of other operatives throughout the intelligence community. The resulting investigation would take years to complete, but the rot was finally being exposed to daylight. Task Force Athena was officially acknowledged, its members posthumously awarded medals their families could actually display. Captain Jennifer Hayes was recognized as a hero who died trying to expose corruption. And Sarah Mitchell Phantom Lynx was offered immunity in exchange for her testimony and cooperation. No charges, no prosecution, just a quiet arrangement that acknowledged her actions had ultimately served justice, even if they'd operated outside the law. She stood now at Arlington National Cemetery, at a memorial for the 12 women who'd fought beside her and fallen in a valley far from home. The headstones were finally marked with their real names, their real service, their real sacrifice. "Hey, Captain," Sarah said quietly, kneeling before Jennifer Hayes' grave. "We did it. We got the bastards. All of them." The stone offered no response, but Sarah felt something ease in her chest anyway, a weight she'd been carrying for 3 years finally lifting. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Turned to find Hale approaching, his rangers spread out respectfully across the cemetery. "Thought we'd find you here," Hale said. "Wanted to pay our respects. These women saved us too, in a way. Without them, without what they found, we'd just be another statistic in Blackstone's ledger." Sarah stood. "They'd appreciate that. Captain Hayes always said the mission wasn't about glory, it was about doing right by the people counting on you. Sounds like a good officer. The best I ever served under." Sarah looked at the rows of headstones, each representing a life cut short by betrayal. "What about you? What's next for the Rangers who became poster boys for defense contractor corruption?" "Back to work," Hale said simply. "Same job, different day. Except now we know to question our intelligence packages a little more carefully." He paused. "What about you? Heard you turned down the book deals, the movie rights, all of it. Don't want fame, just wanted justice." Sarah touched Captain Hayes' headstone one last time. "Think I might try to find out who I am when I'm not hunting monsters. See if there's anything left of the person I was before the mass grave. If you ever need anything backup, reference, someone to call when the nightmares get bad, you've got 8 Rangers who owe you their lives. I'll keep that in mind, Sergeant." She walked away from the graves, from the memorial, from 3 years of ghosts and vengeance. The Barrett was secured in storage now, preserved as evidence but also as a reminder of what one person with enough determination could accomplish. Sarah Mitchell had been many things: soldier, sniper, ghost, witness. Now she had the opportunity to become something new. Just a person, living a normal life, carrying memories that would never quite fade, but learning to exist with them instead of being consumed by them. As she left Arlington, she passed under the main gate and paused to look back one final time. The cemetery stretched out under the autumn sun, peaceful and solemn, full of heroes who'd paid the ultimate price. "Rest easy, Captain," Sarah whispered. "We brought them home. We made it right. Then she turned and walked into the future, one step at a time, carrying the weight of the past but no longer crushed by it. Phantom Lynx was dead. Long live Sarah Mitchell, survivor, warrior, and finally, after 3 long years, at peace.